Rabbi Yehuda says here on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, if a man gives a get to his wife 1 hour before his death, meaning it should be chal an hour before his death, ke'eshes ish l'chol dvareh, until that hour comes about, during that entire period of time after the Nesinas Haget, she is an eshes ish gemura, and if another man will have relationships with her, b'meizid he's chayv chenek, b'shogi he's chayv chatos, because the get is not going to be chal until very close to his death, but not at the time of the Nesinas Haget. That's the Shita Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Megureshes ve'ena meguresh, we have a suffix. And what that means is that the Baal Leo is chayv enoshim tolui, not a chatos, because since his das was that the get would be chal somach lemisa, on every hour of his life, we have to raise the possibility that that hour is the hour before his misa, and therefore every hour she is a suffix ish, suffix grusha, and therefore Baal suffix ish is not chayv chatos, but rather enoshim tolui. The Gemara now quotes a brayso. Tana Rabbanan, Ra'ua shenisyachta imo ba'afela. If we saw this woman that had yichud with her husband, in the case of Hayomi Mati Nicholizeh or Sha'achas Samach Levisasi, or She'yishena imo tachas margolias hamita, she was very close to him. Therefore, you might have raised the possibility that they had bia. Ein choshishin. According to Tanakama, we're not choshesh. Shemen is asku b'davracha. There was a sasek b'tashmish, but choshesh mishum znus. The Gemara later on is going to explain what this means. But ein choshesh mishum kiddush. She does not need a second get after the previous get, the first get that was already delivered to her, because we're not choshesh for a bia l'shem kiddush. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af. She will need a second get in this case because of the suspicion and the possibility that they had a Biel L'Shem Kiddush. Micah Amar. What does the Tana have in mind when he says at the beginning that we're not Choshesh L'Dover Acher, and then he says B'Choshen L'Znus, below L'Kiddushin? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Avua, Hachi Ka'amar. This is what the brayso meant. This is what we should add, so to speak, to the brayso. Ra'ua shenisyachta ein choshen shebaleha, but ra'ua shenivala choshen mishum kiddush. Do we have testimony that there was a bia? We only have testimony that there was yichud. We're not going to assume that simply because they were alone in a private place, therefore he had relations with her. But if we have testimony to the effect that there was a be'ilah, we don't have a doubt about it, that's a certain given, then we have to worry about Kiddushin. Maybe had Bia l'shem Kiddushin, and therefore she needs to get sheni. However, excuse me, there is a scenario in which, even though we know he had Bia with her, we have circumstantial evidence to establish that the Bia was not l'shem Kiddushin, and that's Nosan Lo Ksafim. If he paid her up after the Bia, then Choshin here should not mean what it usually means, but rather told him instead of Choshin, that this Bia was Mishum Znus. And therefore she doesn't need a second get. The Amrina, we assume that Besnana Nosan, he gave her as payment for the Znus. The Ein Choshin Mishum Kiddushin, and therefore he was having a Bia Znus, he was paying her almost as a prostitute. He did not have a Be'il Shem Kiddushin. That's the Shita of the Tanakama, this price, according to the interpretation of Nachman in the name of Rabba Bar Avu. Tomorrow later on is going to ask a kasha on this, and that's going to be a Bai's kasha, because if you notice, Rav Nachman is adding a whole piece that doesn't say in the price. The price doesn't say anything about he gave her money. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, the dissenting view of Rabbi Yossi is af bizu choshen mishum kiddushin. The fact that he gave her money afterwards, that could be a gift. We don't have to assume certainly that it was a payment for a maises nus but maybe he had in mind a Maisa Bia L'Shem Kiddushin, and therefore she needs to get Sheni Misafik. Now, to introduce the next Gemara, we have to mention that there's a Mishnah later on in Daf Pei Aleph, Hamagarish is Ishtov Velona Imo Bepundik, which is very similar to the case that we dealt with in our Brisa of Bafela, etc. And the Mishnah records a machlok between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai say Eina Tzricha Imena get Sheni, and Beis Hillel say Tzricha Imena get Sheni. And the Gemara there says, let's quote a memra of Rabba Bar Chana, not to be confused with Rabba Bar Avua, in the name not of Rav Nachman, but rather in the name of Rav Yochanan. And he whittles down the scope of the machlokes that is recorded in that Mishnah between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And he says the following: if it was a case of Ra'u Shenivala, then we understand the machlokes between Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beit Shammai hold Adam Osa Bilasa Bilas Nus, Menachoshish for Bias Kedusha, and Beis Hillel say Ein Adam Osa Bilasa Bilas Nus, and it was a Bias Kedusha. And therefore, when Beis Hillel require get Sheni, it's because Ein Adam Osa Bilasa Bilas Nus. However, if there was no Ra'u Shenivala, all they saw was that the husband and the wife in that pundiki went into a private place. Everybody, even Beis Hillel, agrees she doesn't need to get shame. Now, earlier we had the brisa that presented a machlok shin Tanakama of Yossi Rav Yehuda. Are we choshesh for bias kiddushin, or should we assume it was a bias nus? And the Gemara clarifies this. Keman azlaha. According to which shita does the din that we mentioned from the Gemara later on, the Mishnah later on Pei Aleph, of the Amar Rabba Rav Chana, Amar Rav Yochanan Machlokes, the Machlokes is because Ra'u, only in a case where the Edom saw that they had Bia, lo Ra'u Shenivel Divrei Kol Ein Tzrichem and a get, even Beis Hillel would agree that there's no requirement to be get because we don't even know that there was Bia. And the Gemara says, Kiman Kidirei Akol. This statement of Rabbi Yochanan, that according to Beis Hillel, and we always pass like Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, we're choshesh if we saw that they had beer, that he had a beer l'shem kiddush, and that's Kidirei Akol. In other words, if we go back to the brisa that records the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi Rav Yehuda, both of them agree that in the case of Ra'u Shenivlo, Choshesh L'Kedushin, right? It's only if Lo Ra'u Shenivlo, we're not Choshesh L'Kedushin. And therefore, both Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda fit in beautifully to the Shita of Beis Hillel. And that means that in a case of Ra'u Shenivlo, we are Choshesh L'Kedushin, and that's exactly what Beis Hillel says, as recorded by the Mishnah on Daf Pei Aleph, in the interpretation of Yochanan. Now we go back to Rav Nachman Omar Rabba Bar Avua. In the interpretation of the brisa, we said that only in Ra'u Shenivlo Choshesh Mishum Kiddushin, but if, even though we saw the beer, he gave her money, then according to Tanakama, we're going to be tole, again, choshen means tole, that he gave her an estan, and ein choshen mishum kiddushin. Maskif le'abai midik sofim ketani. Does the brisa hint or allude to the fact that there was money that was transferred from hand to hand, that he paid her after the bia, and that was no subject of machlokas tanoim? Surely, if the machlokas tanoim revolves around the fact that there was a Nesinas Ksofim, then how could the Bryce have possibly omitted that fact? It's a crucial fact. Elomar Abai Hochikam. Abai says we have to interpret this Bryce in a different way. Ra'ua shenivala choshesh mishum znus. Again, as we emphasized over and over, the word choshesh means tolen. Even though, argues the Tanna Kama, we saw the Ma'aseh Bia, we're going to be told that it was mishum znus, and we're not going to be choshesh and choshesh and mishum kedusha. That's the sheet of the Tanna Kama. And it sounds like Adam Osa Bilasa Bilasnus. There's no need for a second get. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda descends. Omer af. We'll see what the word af means. But chosheshin mishum kiddush. She needs a second get, and that's because we assume that there's at least a logical possibility that that beer was not a bias nus, but rather biel shem kiddushin. So the Gemara clarifies the opinion of Abai. Keman azlaha, according to which shita did we have the following din? The Omar Rabba Bar Chonam Rabbi Yochanan Machlokes Beisil Beit Shammai, in the case of Lona Imo Befumdiki, whether she needs to get sheni or not, is Kshorua Shenivla. We saw the Ma'aseh Bia. Avalo Rua Shenivla Divrei Hakol Ein Tzricha Imenu Get Sheni. And the Gemara explains that according to the explanation of Abaye, that according to Tanna Kama, even though it's Rua Shenivla, we're not Chosh to Kedusha, we're going to assume it's a Bias Nus, is Keman. According to which Shita did Rabbi Yochanan state that Beis Hillel holds, and we have passed like Beis Hillel, that if Ra'u Shenivla Choshen L'Kedushin and Tzricha get Sheni, that can only work according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, that Choshen Mishum Kedushin, when we saw Nivola, because according to Tanna Kama, we're not Choshen L'Kedushin, even in the case of Ra'u Shenivola. So we have no choice but to assume that there was never a machlokas Beis Hillel Beit Shammai in this issue, because if they did have such a machlokas, then it comes out that he's holding like Beit Shammai, and we don't reject Beis Hillel for the halacha is always like Beis Hillel for the how should I say, in order to paskin like Beit Shammai. He points out here that according to Rashi, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Yochanan. V'lo k'misha meid mamid machlokes Beis Hillel Beit Shammai af kishalo ra'u shenivla shebei braysa bevur shek shalo ra'u shenivla lo choshin shema bo'eleh. Maskif lo rava im kain, if the machlokes in the braysa is in a case of Ruach Shenivla and Tanna Kama holds that we're told the Bia and the Bias Nus, Rabbi Yossi holds that with Chosh L'Bias Kedushin. My af. Why did Rabbi Yossi say af? The language of Rabbi Yossi af Chosh Mishum Kedushin is very problematic, because it sounds like we're Choshish V'Znus and also for Kedushin. And that's a steer b'nei ubei, because if you're told in Znus, that's a kula and she doesn't need a second get. And according to what he's saying, then we're not being told in Znus, but rather Kedushin Lahachmir to require a second get sheni. So what's af? And from this kasha, Rava is going to reinterpret the Brayse. Elam Rava hachikama. This is what the Tana means. Ra'ua shenivala choshesh mishum znus v'ein choshesh mishum kedusha. We're told that it was a ma'aser znus according to Tanna Kama, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer af lo ra'ua shenivala. Even if all we see was yichud, nevertheless, even though it's a sphex fake in effect, number one, did they have bia? Number two, did they have bia l'shem kedushin? Choshev mishum kedushin, because eili yichud heinen edi bia, and it's chazaka that he had a relationship with her. They're regilim zebazeh. Therefore, in this case of yichud, they certainly had kedushin, and we have to be choshesh that maybe they had kedushin. I'm sorry, they had bia. Maybe choshesh they had bia l'shem kedushin. Now the Gemara clarifies according to Rava, Kiman Azlaha, the Omar Rabba Bar Bachana, Rabbi Yochanan Machlokes between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai in Lona Imo B'Pundiki. Does she need to get shady or not? Is Ksha Ra'ua Shenivala. Avo Lo Ra'ua Shenivala, Divrei Kol Ein Tzricha Meneget. Kiman, the Lo Kechad. Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of Beis Hillel, and we pass like Beis Hillel, that only in the case of Ra'ua Shenivla or Choshesh L'Kedushin needs a second get, but in Lo Ra'ua Shenivla we're not Choshesh L'Kedushin at all. That doesn't work out according to either of the two Tanoim, not according to Tanakama, not according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. According to Tanakama, even if we saw the Be'ilu, we're not Choshesh L'Kedushin. We're told of his nus. So how can you tell me that the Tanakama would hold like Beit Shammai? And according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, even if we didn't see Nivala, but only saw Yichud, we're Choshesh L'Kedushin. According to Rabbi Yochanan, if Lo Ra'inu Shenivala, everybody agrees, even Beis Hillel, that we're not Choshesh L'Kedushin. So basically, Rava's back is up against the wall, and Behechrik, we have no choice, but other than to say that Rava will hold, like that man Diomer later on, that is Mamid the Machlokes Beis Hillel Beit Shammai, in the case of Lo Ra'u Shenivala, and Beis Hillel is Choshesh L'Kedushin, and he requires a get, even though there's a double suffix. It's Lo Ra'u Shenivala, we don't know if he had Be'ilu Sheim Ishus. And that works out very well according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Now we go back to the Mishnah. Mai ba'osan ayom Rabbi Yehuda omer keishes sich chol dvareha. Rabbi Yossi omer megureshes ve'en megureshes. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, ubilvad sheyamos. When Rabbi Yossi says that because we have a suffix here, the Baal Leha has to bring a korban Hashem totally, that's only if at the end of the day, at some point in time, the Baal died, and therefore every moment of time is a suffix. Maybe it's a shas muchal misa, but if he never died at the end, then this gala milsel mafreya that this is not a get, and he was Baal eishis chayv achatos. Now the Gemara right now assumes that the sefer of the Mishnah Mai ba'osan hayom is talking about a case of the Reish of the Mishnah, where he said, "Harei zeh kitech me'ayom masi b'chol izeh." And even though he added the word me'ayom, we're not going to say that the get is chal l'mafreya from the shas nesinas haget, but rather the get is only going to be chal mishas misa. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says she's a vade eishes ish, and Rabbi Yossi says it's a suffix eishes ish. So the Gemara asks, "Maisi." Are you assuming that the get is only chal with death? Then it's ain't get lecham misa. Rabba, this is what we explained earlier. The Omer, he said to her, meaning 1 hour before I die. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if he hasn't died, then we understand that she's still not a grusha, and therefore she's an eishes and abol lebechayv chatos. But according to Rabbi Yossi, as we explained earlier, every hour is a suffix. Maybe it's the hour before his death, and therefore Bol Leha is like he's Bol suffix. She's kaiva an Asham Toli Torah Rabbanon. We learned in a Brisa Yomim Shebei Tayim, during this period of time in the middle, the Baal is Zakai b'mitzi also b'maisi yodev first the Dorel and Yorsha. If she dies, he gets to collect the Yerusha. And here on Daf Ayin Dalid, u'mitamila, and if he's a kohen, he's mitamila kol shadover ishes ish lechol davar. Ela she'enet tzricha meni get sheni, the get is an effective get, and she'll become a grusha shach hasamach l'misaso di Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer bilasa tluya. Her bia is totally v'yomen until he dies. Okay, then this is where we're going to stop for today. Take this opportunity to wish you all a great Shabbos. Thank you so much.